Manchester United 0, Everton 1. The first time in Premier League history that Manchester United have lost against 10 men at Old Trafford. It was one of those days where pretty much everything went wrong, from the players to the manager. It was just a terrible, terrible night for United. Now what we're going to do today is sort of split the game into sections, because weirdly it was one of those matches where there were very much different phases of the game, but also it all wrapped up really nicely into one big horror show, really, from Manchester United. So let's start off with the first 13 minutes, the only time in the match where Everton had the same amount of players as United. Very early on, United were trying to play the ball out from the back. Before the match, we saw some comments from Amorim about how long United have been playing recently. We know that Lomans in goal has tended to go very, very direct, and Amorim actually said, I don't mind this, but we're doing it a little bit too much. So he wanted to see United trying to play out in the first phase, and that's what we saw early on, and I guess in a sense that's an encouraging sign. The problem is the way that we try and do it. Of course, Luke Shaw and Yoro are going to drop either side, De Ligt's going to go into midfield with Casemiro, and Bruno Fernandes is going to move a little bit higher. In terms of Everton, the way that they approach these situations, it was very bold, it was very aggressive. They were looking to press almost man-to-man at times. So Barry and Dewsbury Hall would come much higher almost into our front two, the midfield are going to back them up as well, and we are also going to see the Everton wingers pushing really high in the press to try and force United back. And there were actually moments where it could connect all the way to a sort of man-to-man battle. Now, the way that they did this sort of changed. Sometimes it would be one of the defenders jumping higher, sometimes it would be an extra midfielder moving forward. But Everton early on were incredibly bold, incredibly aggressive, and didn't allow United to play in this phase. And the problem was, United had no solutions, and that's not particularly surprising, because if you sort of just look at the players that we've got in different areas, particularly in here, you just don't expect Casemiro and De Ligt to be able to play in this part of the pitch, because they're not good at it. They're not press-resistant players. They're not players that take the ball on the turn well at all. They don't move particularly well. They're not very mobile in here, because one of them's a centre-back, and this caused a real problem. Now, like I said, it's important to point out that Everton had different ways of pressing. Sometimes we would see Grealish come a little bit higher, and then Mikalenko would connect, and sometimes Everton would press like this. But regardless of how they looked to do it, they stopped United. Now, naturally, in the opening stages of the game, there was a moment or two where United could get onto the ball and were trying to build, and Everton were forced into more of a mid-block. But even from this point, they were still extremely aggressive with the way that they were playing, and pretty much, again, setting up man-to-man. So the front three are going to come forward to match up with United's back three. That makes a lot of sense. And then Dewsbury Hall and Idrissa Gueye would pick up the two United midfielders. And James Garner, the former United Academy player, was actually tracking Ahmad almost into a back five. And again, for Everton, this meant that they were man-to-man, and early on in the game, this caused a lot of problems for United. United couldn't really get going in that first 15. We didn't really get the ball down properly and start to play. Everton started the game the far faster side until they started slapping each other. Now, of course, after slapping each other, Everton go down to 10 men, and that, of course, changes the way that they are going to play. You physically cannot press man-to-man if you've got less players. That sort of, isn't man-to-man at that point. So Everton are playing with 10, which means United are going to get a bit more time on the ball. Immediately in these positions, United just have that little bit of time to take the extra touch. And now the game is completely changed. It's no longer a game of man-to-man football. United are no longer trying to play out in the first phase, because Everton aren't pressing anymore, and we're also no longer trying to manipulate a man-to-man structure in the middle of the pitch. Instead, Everton are now reduced to more of a 4-4-1 sort of mid-block. And what Everton are going to try and do is contain United, is to reduce their chances, and sometimes that will involve dropping all the way deep into a low block with lots of players behind the ball. The mission now for United is, can you break Everton down? Well, the fact that we scored 0 goals probably tells you that the answer to that question was no. United could not break Everton down. The question is why? We've got numerical superiority. We should be on top. We're at home. We should be able to go and get a now very vulnerable Everton side. The problem is, firstly, we know that United are poor through the middle of the pitch. For starters, Amorim doesn't seem too keen on playing in these areas in the first place. So he doesn't like to push the ball through the middle. That's not sort of how his system and how his philosophy works. We don't tend to see that. Instead, what United try and do is move the ball wide. Now, sometimes we might go inside the pitch to eventually get there, but the end goal is sort of to end up in this zone here, delivering into the box, and in this zone here, delivering into the box. Now, I guess you know, that's not a bad idea. Putting a lot of crosses into the box can be quite a dangerous way of attacking. If you put the ball into the box enough times, you expect the opposition might make a mistake, or you might get a lucky deflection or score a really good goal, something like that. The problem that United had was two things. The players on the pitch, because Ruben Amorim went into this game and decided to play 5 defenders, 7 defensive players in total, if you include the goalkeeper. So Lomans, the back 5, and then Casemiro. So United actually only had 4 attack-minded players on the pitch. Now, in hindsight, it's easy to say that we shouldn't have done that against 10 men. But in my opinion, if you're Manchester United manager, we shouldn't have even done that against 11. It is never acceptable, in my opinion, for United to play with 5 defenders. That is not what this football club is about. So the second that Ruben Amorim does this, I'm sitting there thinking, we might get a result tonight, but we're not going to get a good performance because we're playing about 100 defenders. So that's problem number 1. Problem number 2 is we are terrible at getting players forward into the box and sustaining attacks and suffocating teams. The second we're trying to break down a low block, we know that we are going to struggle. We saw it against Forest recently in the unbeaten run. We're not good at it, and we've been warning you that this would happen. Eventually, United wouldn't be able to play long ball football. Eventually, we would have to try and break teams down, and we called the fact, like you guys did as well, that at some point it would stop working. And the problem was, first of all, we get ourselves into wide zones. You know, let's say we move the ball forward. Everton are narrow and compact because they're down to 10 men, so there's a bit of space out wide. We work the ball wide into this position here. The problem is, we've got Dorgu and Mazraoui. Fullbacks providing the width. Fullbacks are now essentially tasked with providing the decisive action. That doesn't make sense to me. That doesn't make any sense. Now, it would be a little bit different if you've got elite attacking fullbacks, like a Trent Alexander-Arnold in his position, and you've got a great target man striker in the box that you can just whip crosses into. That would make a little bit more sense. But we've got no one in the box initially, no one of great aerial threat, and we've got a terrible ability out wide to play 1 versus 1 or cross. And I think this 10-second window of play just captures this perfectly. Dorgu can't beat his man down the left-hand side, and then just a couple of seconds later, Mazraoui has all the time in the world and puts in the most terrible cross. Now, I don't actually blame Dorgu and Mazraoui, because they are defenders. They shouldn't be tasked with doing this job for 90 minutes against 10 men. It doesn't make sense. Now, eventually, Luke Shaw started to join them, but still, as good as his delivery is, it's just more fullbacks. Try playing a winger out wide. Try being a bit more aggressive. Now, if we fast forward a little bit, 15 minutes into the second half, United have started to make changes. We're still 1-0 down, but finally, Ruben Amorim has decided it's time to get more attackers onto the pitch. Mason Mount comes on for one of the wingbacks at half-time. Ahmad moves to wingback. So immediately, this is better. This is an upgrade. We've got a more attacking player in this position. In the second half, with Ahmad, we were more threatening. We brought Kobbie Mainoo on for Casemiro, which was an interesting decision. I love Kobbie Mainoo. I think he's a brilliant footballer. But if you need a goal, I would tend to keep Casemiro on the pitch, especially when United resorted to crossing. I don't know. It doesn't make sense. But a big confusing one is this one. Dalot for Dorgu. And it's confusing for a few different reasons. One of the reasons is because Amorim recently made a comment about Dalot slowing attacks down because he's right-footed on the left side. So it's weird to then bring him on against a low block. It's also weird to think we're really going to throw the kitchen sink at these guys now and bring on Dalot for Dorgu. Like, if United really want to be attacking, really want to go after this game, you could put an Ahmad at left wing back, for example, and Boomer at right wing back, play them super high and get aggressive players in the 10. That would have been a solution for United. But apparently we felt that Dalot was the best solution, which doesn't make sense. Again, he's not an elite attacking fullback. So what we find in the second half is down the left-hand side, we've got Dalot and Shaw trying to go 1 versus 1, trying to dribble, trying to create, and just completely lacking the ability to do so. Doesn't make a lot of sense. The other thing that we've done here is sort of gone against rule 1 of playing against 10 men in a low block. If you play against 10 men, they've got less players, so there's more ground to cover. So what you should do is try and stretch the pitch as wide as possible to increase the size of the gaps between the Everton players, so they've got more running to do, you're going to tire them out, and over time you're going to wear them down. This substitute does the complete opposite of that, because it gets you a right-footed player on the left. So Dalot wants to keep coming back inside. Mason Mount is right-footed, wants to keep coming back inside. And Mbeumo is left-footed, keeps coming back inside. And Ahmad is also left-footed, keeps coming back inside. Now, whilst Manchester United are trying to stretch a team, all our players are there. And again, in terms of just almost like a basic rule of playing against 10 men, Don't do that. You know, this will be a great example for future managers to use as how you shouldn't attack 10 men at home when you need a goal. You don't decrease the width on the pitch. And basically what United resorted to in the second half was picking the ball up in a position a little bit like this from Ahmad, chucking across into the box, to Xerxes, who's not amazing in the air, Mount, who's not exactly amazing in the air, and Dalot or Dorgu attacking the back post. And yeah, that resulted in a night which didn't have a single shot for United higher than 0.2 XG, despite playing against 10 men for so long. It was bad. Now, so far, a lot of the criticism has been aimed at Ruben Amorim, and rightly so. He got it horribly wrong. He did not give United the best opportunity to win this game, which ultimately is the job of the manager, so he failed to do his job to the required level of a Premier League manager. That's not great. But I also feel that the players let themselves down, and the players simply weren't good enough. There is a lot of talent on this football pitch here. If you just look at this 11, granted they're all in really weird positions, arguably none of them in their best position, but still there's some good players there, and there's players that you expect more from, and they weren't able to provide that. Bruno Fernandes didn't play well. Dalot, Mount, Xerxes, Bumo, Ahmad, Yoro, Delict, Kobe Mainu, short, none of them played particularly well. They were all quite poor. Some of that's, you know, because they are in a weird environment. The instructions they're given are odd. You know, it's this ability to force the team wide constantly. Shaw's playing centre-back when you really want him here, overlapping in the final third. Dalot's on the left wing. Bruno Fernandes is still playing in the 6. Ahmad is really chucked out wide. There's certain positions which don't make a lot of sense. But the big problem for me, really, for United, was the inability to sustain attacks. Again, when you're against a low block, dominate the ball, suffocate them, really suffocate them, attack after attack after attack. It should be waves of play from United, forcing Everton deeper and deeper until eventually they crack and United score. But we didn't do that, because first of all, we were just way too direct with our play. There was a real lack of composure from the team. It was get the ball wide, chuck the ball into the box, which was just giving Everton the ball back. But also, anytime we did lose the ball, we were so easy to attack against. And to me, that's mind-boggling when we started the game with 7 defensive-minded players on the pitch. If you're going to play that many defensive players, at least be good defensively. But we weren't. It was so easy for Everton to go up to Barry. And Barry tormented De Ligt and Yoro. They could not get close to him. The amount of almost free duels that De Ligt had, but Barry still beat him to the ball, was mind-blowing to me. And then the likes of Grealish, Dewsbury Hall and Ndiaye were able to get nice and close on that second ball, and this just meant that Everton constantly had that ability to get out. So United weren't suffocating Everton, because any time the ball came forward, the United players weren't aggressive enough, they weren't intense enough, they didn't win these battles. Everton did. Everton won the battles, and that allowed them to pick up the second ball, and that meant that every few minutes there was now the next wave of Everton pressure, when it should have been the other way around. It should have been United really banging the door down, but instead we had to be worried about defending these transitions. Ultimately, just it didn't work at all. Now, as I sort of hinted at there, it's very important that we blame the players and the manager. Normally we see people want to do one or the other. Either it's Amorim's fault or it's the players' fault. It was both, you know, terrible all round. Amorim set up his players terribly. He set them up for failure, and then the players made sure that they produced failure. It was really poor from United. We didn't win our individual battles. The technical detail was poor. There were a lot of sloppy passes, just unnecessary giveaways, which we didn't need at all from United. But are not helped by the stubborn manager. I think if you're a manager who is chasing a game and you are so stubborn to your system that you choose Dalot to be your wide attacking threat on the left against 10 men when you need a goal, is insane to me. If you are that stubborn as a manager with your system, you cannot work as a manager. It's a matter of time before it all combusts and blows up in your face. Amorim has to prove that he can change that. So far at United, the changes that he has made recently have been to play more direct and things like that. And we were pleased to see that. Pleased to see that Amorim could sort of tinker things a little bit. But we kept saying, it's got to evolve. It's got to be more complex. It's got to be more concept applied. We've got to be a team that can play on the ball, play through the phases, dominate the ball, break a team down. And Amorim proved last night that not only is he incapable of doing that, he doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to be a team that dominates the ball in that way, or certainly the selection of so many defenders suggests that. So there's confusion here. There's real confusion, tactical confusion. There's a confusion for Amorim and his identity of what he wants from this team, and that's incredibly concerning. It's something that's got to be fixed very, very quick. But the players have also got to step up, because, like I said, there's some serious quality there, and you expect them to show that, and they didn't. So basically, It was terrible last night. It was so terrible, in fact, that I don't want to talk about it anymore. So I'm going to wrap the video up there. Thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Hopefully it's a bit of a different insight into the game and what really went wrong for United. There was a lot. But yeah, we are going to wrap it up there. So thank you guys very much for watching this video. I hope you have enjoyed it. If you have, please leave a like, subscribe, and get your notifications on. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next one.